to the Musée Culturel du Mont Carmel, located in Lille, Maine. The building was once a church known as Our Lady of Mount Carmel. The church was built in 1909 by Edmundston contractor Leonid Gagne from plans by architect Theo Daust. The twin Baroque-style belfries of the church housed two archangels blowing trumpets and had been sculpted in 1908 by Quebec sculptor Louis Jobin. Most of the building's windows are narrow with round arch tops and consist of paired round arch sections with a circular motif at the top. Official Catholic religious services ceased in 1978, and in 1984 the church was acquired by l'Association Culturelle et Historique du Mont Carmel, a non-profit organization which is restoring the church building as a museum and a performing arts center.
Hi, this is the Musée Culturel du Mont Carmel in Lille. It was a former church, Notre-Dame du Mont Carmel, that's why we call it that. And the Musée Culturel, it means it's a cultural museum. And we got this back in 1983, and that was given to us by the Bishop of Portland to use it to turn into a museum, and we've been restoring it since then. We had to start off by repairing the foundations and replacing parts of the foundations and the chimney, the heating system, the electrical system, the wiring, well, that would be the electrical system. And then we've been painting the exterior, renewing, we had to redo the angels, we had to make copies of them. And so there have been a lot of projects that we've been doing since 1983. In the past 5 or 6 years, we've been concentrating on the interior. And the interior had tin all over, and on the walls, on the ceilings. And we've been removing that tin bit by bit. We haven't removed it all yet, but we've removed most of it. In the center aisle, you can see that it has all been removed. And now we're trying to, we're cleaning. And so if you zoom up to where that area where they're cleaning, you can see the difference between the dark and the light area being where it's been cleaned. The reason why we want to get back to this original finish, because this is the finish that was made in 1909, is because it's stenciled, and there are miles of stenciling in here. And so that stenciling is going to pop out more since it's been cleaned. We also had to clean off one layer of paint off of the cornice. Cornice is what the apostles are standing on, and we very carefully removed one layer of paint off that, because the original paint with the leaves painted on it is underneath. And if you pan over to the right, let's see where it's been restored. And in order to restore it, all we did is mix the colors exactly, and we just painted over the scratches. Can you zoom in more than that? Yeah, go up more and zoom in more. Yeah, zoom in more. Yeah, more, much as you would. Up above. And the paint is of the canvas leaves. And after we get this all clean, then we'll patch areas of plaster that need to be patched and match the paint. But repaint the ceiling. We're only going to match the paint and paint where it's necessary. We don't want this to look like it was made yesterday. We want it to look like it's always been this way. Okay, this is the sacristy, and this was meant for daily mass. We have the pews, but we've taken them out because we have a lot of concerts here. And we've been restoring this room for quite a long time. And this room was had a blue ceiling and green walls. And we scraped one layer of paint off the entire room. And the blue ceiling was the most difficult part to do. After we scraped all of the ceiling, it looked like this. And you can see that it's a dull grayish color, and then there's wood showing. And that's where the paint wasn't adhering to the wood very well. And so if you pan up just a little bit, we had to match the paint so that we could cover just the wood, where the wood was showing. And so I cleaned a bit of it up just up above here, and you can see that there is a stencil above the cornice there. And when I started to clean it, we used a detergent and scrubbed it like scrubbing a floor. Only you had to scrub it, good 8 or 10 scrubs in order to get the film of paint off, and then rinse it. And what popped up was with the stencils. We could see them, but not as well as we can now. And the paint came pretty white. So we matched the paint. And then for Lent, about 3 years ago, my penance was to clean the ceiling. And I would wash a piece 10 feet by 4 feet every day. And it would take about an hour to get that 10 feet by 4 feet. But it was over the head work, scrubbing with a scrub brush. It was hard work, and I had to wear a filtered mask, and I had to wear a face shield because it was dripping off the ceiling. And so we'd do that, and then the next day I'd come in after it was rinsed, and I would just paint where the wood was showing. So 95% of what you see is the original paint. Only 5% is where I repainted. And then I would move to the next section and do the next 4 by 10 foot section. And it took 60 hours. But there aren't 30 days in Lent. Well, there are 40 days of Lent, but I didn't do it on Sundays. And but toward the end, I really had to put in a lot more time. And now what we've got to do is to bring the stencils up. If you can shoot right up in there where those ceiling, and then if you carefully pan over to here where it's faded, you see where it's faded there?
Yep.
We're going to repaint only that. And we're going to bring it to the intensity of the first corner, that corner over there. So they'll all be of the same intensity. But we don't want to paint them all and make them brighter, because then it would all be fake.
Yeah.
Whereas now, most of it is original. There's just, I think I counted about 12 places that we'd need to bring it up in intensity a little bit more. So it's not so bad. So we'll be able to say that a good 60 or 70% of it is original. And then, if you pan down to the altar, you can see the shadow on the wall up above.
Yeah.
That was when we scraped the paint off, we saw a ghost of the reredos. The reredos is the back of the altar. And that's where the sisters had been cleaning it, but they couldn't clean behind it. And so what we did, we painted it a darker color to emphasize it.
Okay.
So we've got a shape, we've got the shape and the size of what that was. But there are no photographs of it anywhere. So we started measuring, taking some of the moldings off the altar and measuring, and found that this molding right here is the same as this. So we know that there's a molding like this here. And the tabernacle will come up to here. You see, because this will be up on a platform.
Yeah.
And there's another step back. And so in here, which will only probably be down to here, because there's going to be another step back. We have to put the back onto the altar, and there are 2 shelves. And we'll finish them. There'll be 2 columns like here, only the columns will look like this. And that'll be the best that we can do to come up, and then in between here, we'll do a square of a raised panel like what you see here.
Okay.
Only it'll be bigger. But we have those moldings and everything that we need, so it won't be hard to do. We just have to do it, that's all. The other thing is we're repainting the wainscoting. You know, that's down at the bottom of the walls. We scraped 1 layer of paint off that, and it was all grain painted to look like oak. It's not in very good shape. But if you zoom over this way, you can see some that's in better shape. Right here?
Yeah.
So I just painted this afternoon. And because the centers of these didn't scrape well. If you scraped them, all of the paint came off. We couldn't save any of it underneath. So we repainted the yellow color underneath, and then you put a dark color over it, and then while it's still wet, you scrape it with this tool.
Oh, yes.
And you get the lines. And then every other one has larger things. So a little bit later, I'm going to start painting in the graining on every other one. And it doesn't take too long to do. But we have the original as a guide. That over it, right over in that corner, is all restored, and that's original.
Yeah, it's pretty.
We just had to touch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're lucky, behind the altar, that's all original as well. But again, it needs touch up. I can show you, if you zoom in under that window next to that palm tree, you can see how when it doesn't want to scrape well, that's how it comes out.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to repaint that yellow color and then put the other one over it.
Okay.
And on this side, none of it scraped well.
Yeah.
So we repainted the yellow over everything. So there's a lot of work to it. Everything's a lot of work.
Yes, that's for sure.
But it's not worth doing unless it's difficult. That's my philosophy anyway. And everything is yellow. The confessionals, the vestry, all of that is going to be grain painted.
That would be very nice.
So if you want to come out this way. What you see here are some of the medallions on the ceiling in the nave of the main church. And this one that you can see here is the dove of the Holy Spirit. You can see the cross on the top of its head, like a Maltese cross on the top of its head. And there's a wire sticking out of that dove, and that wire is what the sanctuary lamp hung from. So when we put that back, it'll hang out of there.
Okay.
But those medallions are all hand painted, but they had been covered over with tin. So when we had a great photograph from 1910, and that photograph showed what the interior looked like before they put the tin on. So we knew what to expect.
Yeah.
And so when we started moving tin, we thought, well, gee, maybe the plasters are going to fall down behind it. The only place where that happened was right here, because the chimney is right there. And water had come down the chimney. You know, the exterior of the chimney. And had softened that plaster.
Are you going to patch that up?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and people, another thing, if you want to zoom in on one of the windows down below. People ask why, if there were ever stained glass windows, and there were never stained glass windows here. The reason is the decor of the interior is ancient Roman, and they didn't have stained glass windows in ancient Roman times. And the exterior is French Baroque. And in the French Baroque period, they did not want to use stained glass. They wanted clear white light coming in. And so in this building, the windows are really emphasized. And the windows, the design of the windows are as large as the medallions. You know, the circle on the top is as large as the medallion.
Right.
And they're a Celtic cross. And the Celtic cross is a cross with even arms with circles going around the center of it. And it's because the area that we're from in France is a Celtic area. Okay? And below that are the tablets of the commandments. And one of the medallions up the front is of the tablets of the commandments. What's interesting is there are 52 windows in the building, one for each week of the year. And there are 7 windows on each tower, one for each day of the week. Each of these large windows have 365 pieces of glass. One for each day of the year. We're talking about the total.
Shows that church art is not random.
No, it's all plans.
Yeah.
It's all planned. Yeah. It's all planned, but those are things you have to notice. And the other thing is, in the Bible, they talk about the dimensions of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. And they've been finding lately that Notre Dame in Paris is based on those dimensions. And this church is also based on those dimensions, but it's smaller.
Right. The scale is smaller.
Yeah. Well, it's 60 feet wide. The ceiling is 40 feet high. And where it's 90 feet long in just the front part. And the archangels on the exterior were carved by Louis Jobin. And he's a sculptor from Quebec. And he was the best sculptor available back in 1908, 1909. And so he carved them. And the architect of the building was Théophile Daoud, who's from Montreal, and who was trained in Paris. And they asked him for a unique design. They didn't want it duplicated anywhere else, because all of the other churches around here are duplicated in other areas of the country. And so they wanted a unique design, and that's what they got. And there isn't one like it anywhere else. There are some that come close, but they're not the same.
You've been restoring the community rail?
Yeah, we rebuilt the community rail from original pieces. We had some original posts, and we had to pick out the pine tree, cut it down, cut it up, let it dry for a couple of years. And then we had to mill, then we had to turn each one, and it took 2 hours for each one. And we had to clean the lathe every tube that we did, because it was so sappy. Then we had to let it dry longer. We let them dry another year or two. And then we started putting the rail together. And then to put it in, to anchor it right, we had to take up 2 boards in the floor all the way across underneath it. And we had to install 2 2x6 planks to have a 4-inch plate to put it on, because there was already one there. So we were able to get the equivalent of an 8x8 beam. And then they're screwed down with 8-inch long bronze screws. And they're screwed every 18 inches on each side. So it's in there very solidly. Because what they want to do is they want to twist like DNA.
Yeah.
And when we put them together, they were twisting. And I thought, how are we ever going to straighten that out? And the carpenter said, don't worry, it's wood. It'll do what I want it to. And sure enough, we started at one end and started anchoring them down every 8 inches, and it straightened right out. Yeah. And we've been letting it dry now again for a couple of years. It's been 2 years or so. Yeah, we'll put the doors on, put the top plate on, and then we'll paint it, and it'll be painted to look like this marble. It'll be marbleized like this is.
Is a lot of this woodwork here from local pine as well? Do you know?
Oh yeah, it was all local wood. All local wood, yeah. There was a sawmill in town.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the church itself, the wall studs are 3x5s, rough cut. So they're actually 3 inches by an actual 5 inches. And they're 25 feet tall. Yeah, so that's in the walls. And then there are 8x8, so it's framed like a barn. There are 8x8s everywhere.
Right.
And the ceiling, as high as it looks, there's another 15 feet up in the attic.
Yeah, that's how they did it.
Because if you look at the front of the building, there's a round window at the top, and you can't see it from in here at all. It's in the attic. And when we redid the roof, the guys who did the roof, there were 10 guys from a local construction company, Sirois and Michaud. Sirois is in Saint Agathe, and Michaud was here in Lille. And they had 10 men, and they were rappelling off the peak of the roof because they had to be tied in. So they just put mountain gear on, and they didn't use any scaffolding. And they had tarps that went right down to a truck. And so when they took the shingles off, they slid right down into the truck. There was no obstruction or anything. Yeah, worked out really well. They could do 40 feet a day. Take all the shingles off, put plywood down. You had to put plywood down because it's made of boards, and if you put asphalt shingles over those boards, you're always going to hit the crack at some point or other. So they put plywood over the whole thing, and then they put ice and water shield, and they had a hard time to keep it down, so that I think they put it over the whole roof because there's a lot of wind up there. And so they did the whole roof in 5 days, which is pretty incredible. I got some fabulous photos of them standing on the wall of the side of the roof, horizontal to the ground.
Oh my gosh.
And they were doing the drip edge. Oh, it's incredible photographs of them doing that. But they said it was the most solid roof they'd ever been on. But when you go up there, and you can't go up there now, but I mean, I've been up there, and it's a forest of timbers up there. It's a very well built roof. It's an A. a cross piece, pieces going up, and then pieces going out from a center board to the A. So it's braced in lots of places. Yep. Well, they had to. They had to. And one of the reasons why we wanted to take the tin off is because the tin is not original. That's the most important reason. The second most important reason is when the wind blows hard, the building shifts just a little bit. Every building does. But when you've got tin over the entire building, the tin buckles and creaks, and it makes terrible noise. And it creaks from one end to the other, so people can imagine ghosts in the attic or whatever. But that's less and less now that we have removed a lot of the tin. We still have the tin on the ceilings of the side aisles
I was going to say that's what
yeah.
it would be.
And the way that will look is exactly the way it looks on the outside. See over the arches, you see the maple leaves, garlands going around. That'll be on the inside, and there'll be a garland around the top, around the ceiling, where the walls where they meet the ceiling. There'll be some on the ceiling. The only thing I don't know is where the medallions are, if there's a medallion painted up there or not. I don't know that, because it doesn't show up in the photographs.
Why do you suppose they covered everything with this?
I think it was to make it fireproof.
Oh,
Because, you know, they were lighting with candles.
yeah.
There were kerosene lanterns. You can see marks on some of the pillars where kerosene lanterns were.
Okay.
And so I think they were afraid of fire. But that tin, actually, if a fire gets in the wall, that tin is an impediment.
Yeah. This is an old side altar, right? Is this made?
No, this is the main altar.
Oh, okay.
The one behind it is from Saint Hilaire.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
The old altar?
The big altar in the back is from Saint Hilaire.
Really? I'm from Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's the altar in that church.
Oh,
Maxime Albert paid to have that altar made.
And they took it away.
No, no, they didn't take it away. They put it in the basement of the church. And I was going around, I was photographing all the local churches, and the father there asked me, he said, would you like to see the original altar? I said, sure. So he took me down cellar, and I looked at it, and it was warping.
Yeah.
The humidity was getting to it, and it was warping. I said, Father, this is going to get ruined if you keep it here. And he said, what do I do with it? You know, where else can we put it?
I'll take it.
And so I said, no, I said, if you loan it to us, we'll restore it. And that'll give me a chance to restore our altar. And then when you're ready to have it back, give me notice, and I'll finish up our altar, and we'll exchange, and we'll bring it back.
Okay.
Because that's in 10 pieces.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah,
10 pieces.
Yeah.
Are they gonna want it back?
Yeah. We made out the loan for 3 years, and they've renewed that 5 times.
Oh.
So we've had 15 years. And they're waiting for when they want it back. They don't want to put it back in the cellar because it'll warp again.
Well, they should put it back where it was.
Right, but the conditions have to be correct for that. And they're waiting for those conditions to be correct for that.
Then,
In the meantime, it's not doing any harm here. It's good and dry and staying in good shape. But that's all original. That's the original paint. That was never repainted. We just washed it. That's all we did. And then we took the pieces that were warping off and steamed them and pressed them back into the right shape and put them back.
Amazing.
The pieces with all the carving on them were the ones that were warping the most. The curved pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they want it back, all they have to do is tell us, and we'll bring it back to them. But we'll have to finish ours up quickly. But in the meantime, there was a fabulous set of photographs taken of this place back in 1910, and they're glass plate photographs, highly detailed.
Yeah.
And there's one that was taken back at the front door of the altar, showing the whole interior. But the original glass plate is in Van Buren, at the library in Van Buren, and the librarian I asked her, would it be possible to scan just the altar at high resolution? And so she did, and she did an area, in the photograph it was an area 2 inches by 1 inch. And she did it 5,000 DPI. And so she emailed it to me, and I went on my computer and I started enlarging, because on the top of the back of the altar, it was carved. It was all carved out. It wasn't a regular molding. And it was like fleur de lis, and I wanted to know exactly the shape. And so I started enlarging and went in there, and I found out when we started enlarging that underneath it there was carving that we never knew about. But it's enough so we could reproduce it. But I was able to enlarge the molding that I was looking at to its actual size. That's a great photograph. When you take a photograph that's a century old, taken of the entire interior, and you can enlarge a little bit of it to its actual size and maintain the detail.
Yeah, that's...
So what we could do, but this was, these were those glass plate type cameras, and they would expose them for an hour. And maybe more, because I know in one of the photographs, there's a nun that comes in and kneels down and says some prayers and then leaves. And you can see the ghost of her coming in and the ghost of her leaving, and a plainer shot of her sitting in the pew.
Amazing.
Yeah. And anyway, it's just incredible. We could send that to a company, if we could send it to a company that could print an 8-foot by 8-foot print of it, we could paste it on the wall while we're restoring it, and we could trace from that. It would be expensive to do, but we could do that. I guess it would be expensive. I don't know. I'll have to find out. But that's what we want to do. We want to build the back of that the way it should, because that was destroyed when they destroyed the communion rail, and the side altars were destroyed. So we have to rebuild those. But luckily, the camera wasn't exactly in the center, so you can see a column covering the middle of one of the side altars, and on the other side, the middle is open. So between the two, we can reconstruct the whole side altars, and the side altars were both the same. So.
Well, you go to good work.
Well, it's going slowly, but it's all a matter of raising money.
Yeah.
That's the high. So far, we put almost $4 million into it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is this what you do? You do this full time? This is your...
It is now that I'm retired.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm still teaching though, but I'm retired.
What do you teach?
I teach art at the Maine School of Science and Mathematics.
Oh, okay.
And I teach history at the University at Presque Isle.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, but I work part-time in each. So it amounts to a full-time job. So.
I noticed you have two organs that are looking the same.
That's not an organ, that's a piano.
Oh, it's a piano.
That's a piano.
There's another one at the other side, but this one has been stripped.
No,
Square one.
no,
No?
no, they're there's just two pianos. There's one in the back and one here. Yeah, it's a grand piano, but the back doesn't go back. It's square for covered wagons. That's from the 1850s.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Well, with your background, you're...
You gonna play us a tune?
No, no.
Oh, okay. I've never seen
This was signed by a person who owned it in 1876.
Wow.
I know because the person who owned it stopped by. I didn't know it.
Oh, really?
Stopped by, he said, that piano looks familiar. I said, oh, well, yeah, they made quite a few of them. And he came over and he went, he says, it's going to say so-and-so Smith. And he showed me.
Yeah.
He says, it's 1876. And then he pulled it out and showed me. It was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That way you've got a full piano.
How long do
grand
you
piano.
figure it's going to take you to finish?
I don't guess anymore. We wanted to finish by 2010 because that was the 100th anniversary of the building.
Oh, okay.
Because the first mass was on New Year's Day, 1910,
Okay.
and obviously we didn't finish it by then.
How long did it take them to build this initially?
2 years.
2 years?
Taken us 30 to restore it, but 2 years to build it. Well, it's the same with the Parthenon in Greece.
Yeah.
It took them 9 years to build it, it's taken them 40 years to restore it. And that's not the first restoration either.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, it's always a big job.
Oh